The ceiling in the hospital room seemed strangely low to me. I lay on the bunk, looking at the small cracks in the whitewash and listening to the humming of the equipment. It felt like someone was pressing a heavy weight on my chest, and every breath was hard to take. My heart, which had served me well for 78 years, had malfunctioned the previous evening as I was sweeping the yard of my house in Williamstown. My name is Harrison Mercer. I've worked as an auto mechanic all my life, repairing neighbors' cars, and was known around town as the man who could revive any engine. My hands, now covered with age spots and trembling with weakness, were once strong and sure. With them, I had built a house on Maple Street, a sturdy two-story red brick house with a wide veranda and a view of the river. I shuddered when the chamber door creaked open. In walked my son, Tobias, a tall 40-year-old man with thinning hair and a perpetually disgruntled expression. He worked as a realtor, always bragging about how many houses he'd sold in a month, though I suspected he wasn't doing as well as he tried to show. "How are you feeling, Dad?" he asked, sitting down on the edge of the chair by my bed. There was no genuine concern in his voice, just formal politeness. "Alive," I answered, rising slightly on the pillows. "The doctor said I was lucky. If the neighbor Martha hadn't called an ambulance when she saw me fall in the yard." Tobias frowned, as if talking about my possible death was inappropriate. "You should have gotten an emergency call system installed a long time ago," he said. "I've been talking about it for months. You live alone in a two-story house. Something could have happened when no one was looking." There was logic in what he said, but I was always annoyed by his way of talking to me like a naughty child. Since the death of Odelia, my wife, 5 years ago, Tobias and my daughter Mabel had treated me like a burden. Odelia was the link between us. She could smooth things over, find compromises. Without her, our family fell apart like an old machine without grease. "Is the house okay?" I asked, knowing that Tobias was more interested in the structure than in my health. "Yeah," I checked. Locked all the doors, turned off the gas. He paused, drumming his fingers on his knee. "Father, we need to talk about the future. The doctor said you'll need a long recovery, possibly constant care. At your age, living alone in a house this big isn't wise." This is it. The conversation I've been avoiding for years. I'd seen Tobias look at my house every time he came to check up on me. The house I'd built with my own hands in the 60s when land on the outskirts of Williamstown cost pennies. Now it was downtown and property values had skyrocketed. "I'm doing fine," I said firmly. "Martha comes over to help with the cleaning twice a week. I cook for myself, keep the yard in order." "You're in the hospital with a heart attack," Tobias reminded me. "That's not a sign that you're coping." I didn't say anything. It was useless to argue with Tobias. He'd inherited my stubbornness, but not my ability to admit mistakes. He'd always been like that as a child, breaking toys and blaming his sister. As I got older, I got more cunning, but the essence didn't change. "Did the doctor say when I'd be discharged?" I asked, changing the subject. "At least a week of observation." Tobias adjusted his shirt cuff. "I talked to Mabel. She thinks you should move to the Pine Grove nursing home. It's got good care, nursing staff around the clock." Pine Grove was where they used to send old people to die. I've been there several times, visiting old friends. Small rooms, the smell of medicine and despair, old men with empty eyes in wheelchairs. "No," I said firmly, "I'm coming home." "Father, be reasonable." I said no. My voice was weak but determined. "This is my home. I built it for Odelia when we were first married. Every nail in it was hammered in with my hands. I'm going to die there, not in some pine grove." Tobias sighed with feigned patience. "All right, let's not argue now. You need some peace. We'll talk about it later, when you're feeling better." He got up and headed for the door, then turned around. I've arranged for Nurse Winifred to keep a particularly close eye on your condition. She will give you medication and check your vitals. The doctor thinks you may need to adjust your dosages. I nodded, though something in his words made me wary. Tobias had never been a caring son. He'd visited me once a month or so over the past 5 years, usually with a request or to remind me to think about the future, a euphemism for talking about my will. After he left, the room became quiet. I looked out the window at the gray October sky and thought about my house. 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, a workshop in the basement where I spent thousands of hours working on various projects. Once the house had been full of life, the laughter of children, the aroma of Odelia's baking, the sounds of music from the old record player. Now it was quiet, with only the ticking of the clock to break the silence. But it was my home, my fortress, and I wasn't going to give it up. In the evening, Nurse Winifred came in, a thin woman with sharp features and cold eyes. She checked my vitals, made a note in my chart, and took out a tray of pills. "Mr. Mercer, it's time for your medication." Her voice was professionally polite, but without warmth. "What are these?" I asked, looking at the different sizes and colors of pills. "Heart medication, painkillers, and sleeping pills," she answered in a high-pitched voice. Dr. Cumming had prescribed the full course. I took a glass of water and swallowed the pills one by one. Winifred watched me as if expecting me to try to deceive her. "Your son is very worried about you," she said, putting the tray away. "He told us to call him if there was any change." "Tobias has always been an anxious child," I replied, though I knew my son's anxiety had little to do with my health. Winifred left, and I felt the sleeping pills starting to take effect. My thoughts were confused, my eyelids heavy. Through my slumber, I remembered the days when I had built my house. Young, full of vigor, I worked from dawn to dawn, laying brick after brick. Odelia would bring me my lunch in tubs, sometimes helping me by handing me tools. We were so happy then, so full of hope for the future. I woke up in the middle of the night with a strange feeling. Something was wrong. My head was spinning more than usual. My mouth was dry. I tried to reach for the nurse's call button, but my hand wouldn't listen. Panic gripped me. Is this another attack? With difficulty, I managed to sit up on the bed. The room swayed before my eyes like the deck of a ship in a storm. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm myself down. Gradually, the dizziness lessened and I was able to stand up, holding onto the headboard. I needed to go to the bathroom, so I slowly made my way to the door in the corner of the room. As I passed the next bunk, I noticed that it was empty. The patient who had been there during the day had apparently been moved to another room. As I returned, I heard voices in the hallway. The door was ajar, and through the crack I saw Tobias talking to Dr. Cumming, a tall man with a graying beard. It was strange to see my son in the hospital so late. The clock on the wall showed it was early 1 in the morning. "His condition is stable, but given his age and medical history, the prognosis is cautious," the doctor said in a low voice. "How long can it take?" Tobias hesitated, searching for words. "A natural process." I froze, not believing my ears. My own son had asked the doctor how long I had to live. "It's impossible to say for sure," the doctor replied. "With proper care, Mr. Mercer might live a few more years." Tobias looked disappointed. "A few years? But his condition is critical, isn't it?" "Not exactly. The heart attack was serious but not catastrophic. With the right treatment and lifestyle—" "Doctor," Tobias interrupted him, lowering his voice so low I could barely hear him. "My father is suffering. He won't admit it, but I can see it. It's a disease that torments him. Can't you—" He paused. "Give him a stronger dose of painkiller. Something to help him, go away quietly." The blood froze in my veins. My own son asked the doctor to help me die. Not out of mercy. I wasn't in pain or asking to die. He wanted to get rid of me so he could have my house. Mr. Mercer, the doctor's voice turned cold. What you are asking for is illegal and against medical ethics. I cannot and will not give your father drugs to hasten his death. You don't understand, Tobias insisted. He's in agony. This life is not worthy of him. And the financial burden— I understand your concern, the doctor interrupted him, but it's my duty to look after the patient's health. Your father has been optimally treated, and I would advise you not to bring it up again unless you want the hospital administration to take an interest in your intentions. Tobias stepped back, raising his hands in a conciliatory gesture. Of course, doctor. I'm just worried about my father. I apologize if I misspoke. I flinched away from the door and hurried back to bed, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. My own flesh and blood wanted me dead, and not just wanted it. It was actively trying to hasten it by manipulating the doctors. With trembling hands, I pulled the blanket up to my chin and closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep when I heard the door open wider. Tobias's footsteps approached the bed and I felt his gaze on me. He stood like that for a few moments, just watching. Then he sighed and walked out of the room. I lay there with my eyes closed, but sleep wouldn't come. Memories swirled in my head. Tobias as a child, his first bicycle that I'd built from parts in my workshop, high school competitions where I'd cheered for him from the bleachers, college money troubles when I hadn't hesitated to give up my savings so he could finish his education. Where did I go wrong? When did my son turn into a man capable of wanting his own father dead for the sake of an inheritance? The morning found me awake. I had made a decision. If Tobias wanted to get rid of me, he would have to do better than that. I wasn't going to give up without a fight. I had to be careful, observant, and most importantly, pretend I didn't suspect anything. Nurse Winifred entered with a tray of pills, and I faked a sleepy smile. "Good morning, Mr. Mercer. How are you feeling today?" "A little better," I lied, though I actually felt worse after a sleepless night. "What kind of pills are those?" "The same as yesterday," she answered. "For my heart, for pain, and for sleep." I nodded and dutifully swallowed them, but I noticed that the blue pill she called a painkiller was larger than yesterday's. Probably just a different manufacturer. Or maybe Tobias had found a way to influence my treatment after all. As Winifred walked out, I reflected on my situation. If my own son wanted me dead, who could I trust? Daughter Mabel had been cold to me for years, especially after I refused to give her money for a failed business project. Mabel's granddaughter Claire was the only person in the family who seemed to genuinely care about me, but she was only 16 and living with her mother across town. I was alone against my own family, in a weakened state, dependent on medication given to me by people potentially under Tobias's influence. A noise came from the hallway. A new patient was being brought in. A short time later, the door opened and a bed was wheeled into the room. There was an older man about my age with a mop of gray hair and lively eyes. "Good afternoon," he said when the orderlies had gone. "Lester Watcom. We seem to be neighbors in misfortune." "Harrison Mercer," I introduced myself. "What happened to you?" "Pneumonia," Lester replied with a wry grin. "Third time in 2 years. My lungs aren't what they used to be. 40 years as a pharmacist, breathing all kinds of chemicals. And you?" "Heart. Had an attack while I was working in the yard." Lester nodded understandingly. "Yards are dangerous for our brother. Last year I broke my wrist trying to fix a fence. Wife won't let me go any farther than the porch with a shovel now. We got it talking. It was nice to talk to someone of my generation who understood my references and jokes. Lester turned out to be an interesting conversationalist. He'd seen a lot in his life, working in a pharmacy, knew everyone in town. "You said you were a pharmacist?" I asked, remembering my suspicions about the pills. 42 years behind the counter, he confirmed proudly. "I retired 5 years ago when the Med Farm chain bought our family pharmacy. You know, pharmacists used to be like doctors. People came in for advice. We knew all the customers by name, remembered their medical histories. You must have a good knowledge of medicines? Better than a lot of doctors, Lester grinned, especially the younger ones who can only prescribe what the drug companies recommend. I wondered if I should trust my suspicions to this man, but I didn't have much choice. The day passed in conversations with Lester and a brief visit from Mabel, who brought me my toothbrush and pajamas from home. She was tense and avoided a direct look, hurrying away. I wondered if she knew of her brother's plans. That evening, when Winifred brought the pills, I noticed Lester watching her closely. "What's that blue pill?" I asked the nurse, pointing to the medicine that was bothering me. "Oxycodone," she replied. "It's a strong painkiller. The doctor increased the dosage to make you more comfortable." I felt a chill run down my spine. I hadn't asked for the painkiller to be increased. Moreover, I felt almost no pain, only discomfort and weakness. When Winifred left, Lester coughed. "Oxycodone in these doses is usually prescribed to terminal cancer patients," he said quietly. "It's unusual for cardiac patients, especially if there's no severe pain." Our gazes met, and I saw understanding in his eyes. He knew something was wrong. "My son," I whispered. "I think he wants to get rid of me." Lester didn't look shocked. "Unfortunately, I've seen this sort of thing before. Not that often, but—" He shook his head. "Do you have something he wants?" "A house. I built it with my own hands in the 60s. It's worth a fortune now." Lester rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "If you're right, we need to be careful. Don't take those pills. I'll show you how to hide them." That night, as the room grew quiet, I heard the door open softly. Through my closed eyelids, I saw Tobias's silhouette creeping toward my bunk. He leaned over, peering into my face, checking to see if I was asleep. My breathing was slow and steady, pretending to be asleep. Tobias straightened up and whispered something I could barely hear. "It's time for you to go, old man. You've lived long enough." Then he went out as quietly as he had come in. I lay motionless, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no doubts now. My own son wanted me dead. "Give him a stronger dose," I whispered, remembering the conversation I had overheard. But he didn't know I was awake then. He didn't know that I had heard his request to the doctor, and most importantly, he didn't know that I had already started tampering with the pills that could kill me. The morning started with dizziness and nausea. I woke up feeling like the room was spinning around me. I tried to sit up and almost fell out of bed, my body feeling foreign, my arms and legs unsteady. It was strange because last night, following Lester's advice, I had hidden a blue oxycodone tablet under my tongue, and when Nurse Winifred turned away, I took it out quietly and clenched it in my fist. "What's the matter, Mr. Mercer?" Lester's voice sounded distant. "I'm dizzy." "Dizzy," I said, grabbing the bed rail. Lester pressed the nurse's call button and Winifred came in a minute later. She took my blood pressure, my pulse, and listened to my heart. "My blood pressure is low," she said. "It could be a reaction to the medication. I'll let Dr. Cumming know." When she left, Lester leaned over to me. "Did you throw that pill away?" "Yes," I whispered. "As soon as she left, I threw it in the toilet." He rubbed his chin. "So it must be the other drugs. Let me think. What else were you taking?" "A little white and pink capsule. She said it was for the heart." Lester frowned. "That's odd. Normally, heart medications don't produce this kind of reaction. Unless—" He stopped talking, thinking. Maybe the dosage is too high, or an incompatible combination. I remembered the words I'd heard Tobias say, "Give him a stronger dose." Maybe he'd gotten what he wanted despite the doctor's refusal. Maybe he'd managed to influence the nurse. The day passed in a half-dream, half-nonsense. I felt nauseous, weak, and apathetic. Dr. Cumming came in, examined me, wrote something down on my chart and said he would adjust my treatment. I wanted to tell him about my suspicions, but I was afraid. What if he didn't believe me? Or worse, What if he was in cahoots with Tobias? By evening, I felt a little better. Lester entertained me with stories from his practice as a pharmacist, and I was grateful for his company. At one point, he discreetly turned the conversation to my family. "Does your son visit you often?" I grinned. "More often than usual. Before the hospital, he came once a month, and that was if he needed anything." "And your daughter? Mabel?" I sighed. "She lives across town, busy with work. She runs a supermarket, always working overtime. Sometimes comes by with her granddaughter Claire." "Do you have a good relationship with your daughter?" I wondered. Mabel had always been a difficult child. Withdrawn, serious, didn't like to show emotion. In some ways, we were alike. Maybe that's why we couldn't find common ground. I wouldn't say that. After my wife died, it got complicated. Mabel blames me. "For what?" Lester asked cautiously. "For not insisting that Odelia go to the doctor sooner." I swallowed the lump in my throat. My wife didn't like doctors, always said she could do it herself. When she'd gotten stomach pains, she'd written it off as indigestion, taking home remedies. I offered to call a doctor, but she refused. After a month, she agreed, but it was too late. Terminal pancreatic cancer. 2 weeks later, she was gone. Lester nodded sympathetically. "And your son? Does he blame you too?" "Tobias blames the whole world for his problems," I grinned bitterly. "But, in the case of his mother, yes, I think he thinks I could have insisted more strongly too." The door of the room opened, interrupting our conversation. Mabel entered, a tall, thin woman of 45 with her hair in a tight bundle. Her features were delicate, like Odelia's, but her face always expressed displeasure. "Hello, Father," she said as she approached the bed. "How are you feeling?" "I've been better," I replied, trying to sit up higher on the pillows. Mabel helped me get comfortable, adjusting the blanket. There was no warmth in her movements, only mechanical concern. "The doctor said they'll keep you here for at least a week." She set a bag of fruit on the nightstand. "I brought apples and grapes, and clean pajamas." "Thank you," I nodded. "How's Claire?" Mabel's face softened at the mention of her daughter. "She's good. She's getting ready for college. She wants to go to medical school." "I always knew she'd make a good doctor," I smiled. "She has a good heart." Mabel remained silent, looking at Lester, who was tactfully pretending to read a book. "This is Lester Watcombe, my roommate," I introduced him. "Lester, this is my daughter Mabel." They exchanged polite nods. "Did Tobias come by?" Mabel asked, sitting down on the edge of the chair. "Yesterday," I answered, watching her reaction carefully. "He said he was talking to you about the nursing home." Mabel pressed her lips together. "Yes, we discussed the options." "Father, you can't continue to live alone in a house this big. You'll need constant care after you're discharged. Nursing care maybe, but not a nursing home," I said firmly. "You could hire a caregiver for the first time." "It's expensive," Mabel objected. "I have savings." "Which would run out quickly if I spent it on a private caregiver." I looked at my daughter more closely. She didn't sound as insistent as Tobias. She spoke practically, but with no ulterior motive. Mabel had always been judicious, even cold, but not angry. "Do you agree with your brother?" I asked bluntly. "That I'm better off at Pine Grove?" Mabel sighed. "I don't know what's better, Father, but I do know that you need care, and neither I nor Tobias have the ability to provide it. I have work, and Claire, he has his own affairs." His own business, I thought. I wonder if she knows how desperate he is. "Let's decide that when I get out of the hospital," I suggested, feeling tired from the conversation. Mabel nodded and stood up. "I had to go to work. Claire will stop by tomorrow after school." When she left, Lester put the book aside. "It doesn't look like your daughter is in cahoots with your son," he said. "No," I agreed. "Mabel is practical to the point of callousness, but she wouldn't want me dead. She just doesn't care. Or she hides it well." Lester shrugged. "I don't want to scare you, but it's best to be careful with everyone. I nodded, acknowledging his point. After Mabel left, I fell into a doze and dreamed about Odelia. We were sitting on the veranda of our house drinking lemonade, and she was laughing at something I said. Her laugh was always light as a bell, made the wrinkles gather around her eyes. "Harrison," she'd say, "you're the most stubborn person I know, but that's exactly why I love you." I awoke to the sound of footsteps. Winifred entered the room with a tray of medicine. It was about 6 o'clock in the evening, time for my next dose. "How are you feeling, Mr. Mercer?" she asked, checking the monitor. "Better than this morning," I answered. "I'm still a little dizzy." "Dr. Cumming adjusted your dosage," she said, handing me a cup of pills. "Remove the oxycodone since you're not complaining of much pain." I took the cup and saw that the blue pill was indeed gone. In its place was a yellow capsule. "What's this?" I asked, pointing to the new medicine. "It's a sedative, a mild sedative. It'll help you sleep better." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Lester shake his head slightly. We agreed that I would show him all the new medications before I took them. "Can I ask for a bigger glass of water?" I asked Winifred. "This one is too small. It's hard for me to swallow." She nodded and walked out. As soon as the door closed, I showed the pills to Lester. "What do you think?" He examined the capsules carefully. "The white one is definitely a heart medicine, looks like digoxin. The pink one's probably a statin for cholesterol. But the yellow one," he frowned, "could be a benzodiazepine, judging by the shape and color. It's a sedative, but it's pretty strong. Combined with heart meds can produce dangerous side effects, especially in the elderly. Slow breathing, drop in blood pressure." She said the doctor prescribed it. Lester shook his head. "It was possible. But it's also possible that the nurse is acting at your son's behest. It's the middle ranks who are the easiest to influence. They dispense the medication, but are rarely scrutinized." Winifred returned with a large glass of water. I thanked her and pretended to swallow the pills, actually hiding them behind my cheek. When she left, I quickly pulled them out and showed them to Lester. "What am I supposed to do with them?" "Throw the yellow one away," he advised. "The others are probably really for the heart, but you have to be sure." He thought for a moment. "I have an idea. My wife is coming tomorrow. I'll ask her to bring the drug book from home. It's old, but the main drugs are described in it." The next morning I felt better. I guess the effects of the previous medication were starting to wear off. After breakfast, Dr. Cumming came in for his rounds. "How are you feeling, Mr. Mercer?" he asked, checking my vitals. "Less dizzy," I replied, deciding to be honest about it. "But still weak." "That's normal after a heart attack," he nodded. "Your vitals will stabilize, but recovery will take time. At your age, the heart recovers more slowly." "Doctor," I decided to take a chance. "They gave me a yellow capsule yesterday. They said it was a sedative. Are you sure I need it? I'm a good sleeper." Dr. Cumming frowned. "I didn't prescribe a sedative, just heart medication and vitamins." We exchanged glances with Lester. So Winifred was acting on her own initiative or at Tobias's behest. "Maybe it was a mistake," I suggested, not wanting to blame the nurse right away. "Maybe it was mistaken for another patient." "Maybe," the doctor replied, but I could tell from his tone that he didn't believe it was an accident. "I'll check it out. If you are given anything that was not in my prescriptions, let me know at once." When the doctor left, Lester shook his head. "Your son is acting through a nurse. It's bad enough, but now the doctor's been warned. It'll be harder to slip you something dangerous." I sighed, feeling a mixture of relief and bitterness. Relief that Dr. Cumming seemed to be on my side. Bitterness that my own son had tried to kill me. After lunch, Claire arrived, my granddaughter, a slender girl with long brown hair and smart Odelia eyes. She was the only person in the family who reminded me of my wife, not only in appearance but also in character. Kindness and gentleness combined with inner strength. "Grandfather," she hugged me gently but warmly. "How are you?" Mom said. "You're better." "Much better," I smiled, glad to be with her. "Especially now that you're here." Claire pulled a book out of her backpack. "I brought you a detective book. You like detective books. And also," she lowered her voice, "homemade cookies. Don't tell the nurses." She winked and placed a napkin-wrapped package on the nightstand. I laughed, for the first time in days. "You're a real treasure, Claire." She sat down next to me and talked about school, about preparing for college, about her plans to become a doctor. I listened to her with pride, thinking about how happy Odelia would be to see how her granddaughter had grown. "Did Uncle Tobias come to see you?" Claire asked, her tone changing. "Yeah, a couple times," I answered cautiously. "Why?" Claire paused for a moment, as if deciding whether to speak. "He's been weird lately," she said finally. "He came to my mom and me last week asking about your house, about the will. Mom said it was none of his business and they had a fight. I was surprised. So Mabel wasn't in cahoots with Tobias like I'd feared." "What else did he say?" "That you'd be better off in a nursing home, that the house was too big for one person, that it could be sold for a bargain." Claire shrugged. "The usual stuff he talked about, but this time he was kind of desperate." "In what way?" "I don't know how to explain it. Nervous, twitchy. Mom said he must be having money problems again." "Again," I thought. "So Mabel knows about his financial difficulties." "Claire," I took her hand, "have you noticed anything strange in your uncle's behavior toward me? Maybe he's been saying something." "Like what?" She frowned. I didn't want to scare my granddaughter with my suspicions, but I needed an ally. "Just any weirdness," I answered evasively. Claire hesitated. "Well, he's always treated you with less than respectful," she said carefully. "Called you old man behind your back, said you were out of your mind. His usual manner, but recently—" She hesitated. "I overheard him talking on the phone in our kitchen when he thought no one was listening, telling someone that he'd get the money soon, that the old man wouldn't last much longer. That was the day before your attack." A chill ran down my spine. So Tobias had planned ahead, maybe even counted on the heart attack killing me right away. "Thank you for telling me." I squeezed my granddaughter's hand. "It's important to me." "Do you think Uncle Tobias wants to hurt you?" Claire asked shrewdly. I looked at her, a 16-year-old girl who already understood the dark side of life. "I don't know," I lied, "but it's best to be careful." When Claire left, promising to come back in a couple days, Lester, who had tactfully pretended to doze off during our conversation, opened his eyes. "Smart girl," he remarked. "And she loves you." "The only one in the family," I sighed. "Sometimes I think she's more Odelia's granddaughter than mine, just as kind and perceptive. I apologize for exceeding the character limit. I will recalculate accurately and redo the chapter within the stated limit of 9,000 to 100,000 characters." On my third day in the hospital, I became finally convinced that Tobias was indeed trying to hasten my death. This realization did not come as a sudden revelation, but as a gradual putting together of puzzle pieces. The overheard conversation with the doctor, the strange medications they were trying to give me, the insistence on the house and will all indicated that my own son wanted to get rid of me. "Mr. Mercer, it's time for your medication," Winifred said, entering the room with the familiar tray. I smiled and obediently took the cup of pills. After talking to Dr. Cumming, the blue oxycodone pill was gone, as was the yellow capsule. Only the white and pink ones, the ones Lester had identified as heart medications. "Thank you," I said, pretending to swallow them but actually hiding them under my tongue. When Winifred came out, I showed the pills to Lester. "Are you okay?" I asked. Lester examined them carefully, checking them against the reference book my wife had brought. "Yes, they're standard heart medications. The white one is digoxin, the pink one is a statin. They should be taken." I swallowed the pills, feeling relieved. After the incident with the yellow capsule, Dr. Cummings seemed to have taken more control of my treatment, but I realized Tobias wouldn't give up so easily. We need to continue to be careful, I told Lester, and start collecting evidence. Lester nodded. What do you mean? Evidence that Tobias wants me dead. If I just say it, no one will believe me. They'll think it's an old man's paranoia. At that moment, the door opened, and an unfamiliar man in a light blue uniform with the badge Perrin Hollis, nurse, entered the room. Good afternoon, gentlemen, he said with a pleasant smile. I'm filling in for Winifred for the next few days. She's taken a leave of absence for family reasons. Lester and I looked at each other. Winifred suddenly disappeared right after Dr. Cummings started checking on her work? A coincidence? Unlikely. Perrin was a tall African-American man of about 35 with kind eyes and calm, confident movements. He checked my vitals, wrote them down on my chart, and asked how I was feeling. Better, I answered honestly. The dizziness was almost gone. Good, he nodded. Dr. Cummings says your condition is stabilizing. If this continues, you could be discharged in a few days. As Perrin walked out, Lester looked at him thoughtfully. Interesting coincidence with Winifred's disappearance, he said. Perhaps Dr. Cummings suspended her, I suggested, after I asked about the yellow capsule. Or your son decided to change tactics. Lester lowered his voice. The nurse failed, so now he's going to look for other ways. I nodded, realizing he was right. If Tobias was really serious, he wouldn't stop with the failed attempt at medication. After lunch, Claire came in as promised. She brought me fresh fruit and a new magazine about old cars, a long-time passion of mine that only my granddaughter remembered. How are you feeling, Grandpa? She asked, sitting down on the edge of the bed. Much better, I smiled, happy to see her. Maybe I'll be discharged soon. Claire frowned. And then what? Mom says you can't go home alone. I don't want to go to a nursing home, I shook my head. Maybe I'll get a nurse for a while. Claire thought for a moment. I could come over every day after school, she suggested. Help with cleaning, cooking. And in the summer, when the school year was over, I could even move in with you. I was touched by her offer, but I didn't want to put that kind of responsibility on a 16-year-old girl. That's very sweet of you, Claire, but you need to focus on your studies, especially if you want to go to medical school. She shrugged. I can study with you too. It's quiet in the house, no one's bothering me, and I still have to learn to cook. Let's talk about it when I'm discharged, okay? I suggested, although the idea of living with my granddaughter was becoming more and more appealing, especially since Tobias wasn't going to give up trying. We talked about things for a while, and then I decided to take a chance and ask her for help. Claire, you're good with phones, right? Sure, she nodded. Why? I pulled out my old smartphone, which Mabel had brought along with the charger and other things. I want to learn how to record conversations, I said bluntly, and to save those recordings so that they can't be easily deleted. Claire raised her eyebrows in surprise. Why would you want to do that, Grandpa? I hesitated, not knowing how much I could tell her, but then I decided she was old enough to understand and smart enough to help. I have reason to believe that your Uncle Tobias does not wish me well, I said carefully. I want proof in case he does something against the law. Claire turned pale. Do you think he wants to hurt you? Because of the house? Maybe, I nodded. I heard him asking the doctor to give me a stronger dose of painkillers, even though I wasn't complaining of pain. And the nurse tried to give me medication that the doctor didn't prescribe. Claire looked shocked, but not entirely surprised. I always knew that Uncle Tobias wasn't the most good man, she said quietly. But to think that he was capable of... She did not finish the sentence. I could be wrong, I added hastily, not wanting to traumatize my granddaughter. That's why I need proof. Claire nodded decisively. I'll help you. Give me your phone. She quickly found a voice recording app and showed me how to use it. Here you press the red button to start recording and here to stop. The file is saved automatically to this folder right here. I followed her actions carefully, memorizing the sequence. How do I make sure that Tobias can't delete these recordings if he takes my phone? Claire thought for a moment. The easiest way is to send the file straight to my email. That way, they'd be in two places. I'll show you how to do it. She patiently explained to me how to select a file, hit the share button, and send it to her email. I'll create a special folder for these entries, she said, and I'll put a password on them so no one but me can open them. Thank you, I squeezed her hand. You're a true friend, Claire. She smiled, but then she got serious. Grandpa, if you really think Uncle Tobias is dangerous, maybe you should tell the police. I shook my head. Unless I have proof, they won't take me seriously. They'd think it was senile paranoia or a family quarrel. Claire nodded, understanding my logic. Then be careful, and call me if you feel something's wrong, any time of the day or night. After Claire left, I felt better. Now I had a plan and an ally. I could start gathering evidence against Tobias. In the evening, he came himself, as always, with a strained smile and contrived concern. How are you, Father? Tobias asked, sitting down in the chair beside the bed. The nurses say you're better. Yeah, I'm on the mend, I replied, discreetly turning on the recording on the phone I kept under the blanket. The doctor says you might be discharged in a few days. Tobias frowned. Wasn't that a little early? Your condition was serious. I guess I'm stronger than I look, I grinned, watching his reaction carefully. You can't go home alone anyway, he said insistently. Mabel and I had already discussed our options. Pine Grove is ready for you as soon as you're discharged. I'm not going to a nursing home, I said firmly. I'm going back to my house. Tobias clenched his teeth, clearly holding back his irritation. Father, be reasonable. You just had a heart attack. You need constant care, medical supervision. I'll hire a nurse, I objected. I have savings, which would run out quickly. Tobias shook his head. Private caregivers are expensive. Besides, the house needs constant maintenance. The roof leaks. The tiles in the bathroom are falling off. You said so yourself. He was right. The house did need work, but I knew he was only concerned about the condition of the house because of its potential sale value. I can handle it, I said stubbornly. This is my house, Tobias. I built it with my own hands for your mother. I'm not leaving it. Tobias sighed, changing tactics. All right, let's consider a compromise. Sell the house and use the money to buy a smaller apartment in a modern building with an elevator and a concierge. You'll have money left over for a caregiver and a comfortable life. I knew exactly what he was getting at. If I sold the house, the money would probably go through him as a realtor. It wouldn't take long to convince the old man out of his mind to sign the papers. No, I said firmly. I'm staying in my house. Tobias couldn't take it anymore and raised his voice. Damn it, Father! Why are you so stubborn? A house is just a building. It costs a fortune to heat empty rooms. It's my house, I repeated calmly, and my money. I will spend it as I see fit. On my 5th day in the hospital, I felt much better. The dizziness was completely gone. My blood pressure had stabilized, and Dr. Cummings said that if this continued, I would be discharged in 2 days. This news should have been cheering, but instead I was feeling anxious. At the hospital, I was under constant observation. Lester and Perrin were here, and they had effectively become my protectors. At home, I'd be vulnerable, even with Claire by my side. What are you thinking about, Mr. Mercer? Lester asked, noticing my anxiety. About what will happen when I'm discharged, I answered honestly. Tobias wouldn't give up trying. Lester nodded, understanding my concerns. We need to gather more evidence while you're still here, he said. And maybe talk to Dr. Cummings straight, I wondered. The doctor seemed a decent man and had already been vigilant about Nurse Winifred. Perhaps it was worth the risk to tell him of my suspicions. At that moment, Perrin entered the room with a tray of medicines. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," he said with a smile. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," I answered. "The doctor says you'll be discharged soon." Perrin nodded. "Yes, your vitals are much improved, but you still have to be careful for the first time after you're discharged." I took the pills without fear. Perrin was reliable, and as Lester had assured me, all the medications were standard for my condition. When Perrin finished checking my vitals, I ventured out. "Perrin, can I ask you something in confidence?" He nodded seriously. "Of course, Mr. Mercer." "You said that Dr. Cumming asked you to be especially careful with my medication. Why do you think that was?" Perrin thought for a moment, then looked at the closed door and lowered his voice. "I shouldn't talk about this, but Dr. Cumming found discrepancies in the medication log. Winifred was giving you medications that weren't prescribed." "Like what?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Heavy sleeping pills, narcotic painkillers in excessive doses. These are dangerous drugs, especially for patients with heart problems." I nodded, feeling a chill run down my spine. So I was right. Tobias was really trying to kill me with the nurse's hands. "Thank you for your candor," I said. "I need to talk to Dr. Cumming." Perrin looked at me carefully. "You suspect something, don't you?" I met his gaze. "Yes, and I have proof." Perrin nodded. "I'll tell the doctor you want to see him. He should be here for his evening rounds." After Perrin left, Lester moved his chair closer to my bed. "Are you sure you want to tell the doctor?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I nodded. "I need allies. An official confirmation that Winifred was giving me dangerous drugs would be important evidence." Lester agreed, though I could see the worry in his eyes. In the afternoon, Claire came in, bringing another car magazine and homemade cookies. She was in high spirits. "I talked to Mom," she said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "She's agreed to let me move in with you for the summer, and she'll bring me every day after school for the rest of the school year." I smiled, touched by her concern. "Thank you, Claire, but are you sure you want to do this? Taking care of an old man isn't the most fun for a girl your age." She snorted. "First of all, you're not just an old man. You're my grandfather. Second, you're not that infirm. And thirdly," she turned serious, "after what you told me about Uncle Tobias, I don't want you to be alone." I squeezed her hand, feeling deeply grateful. "Did you check the mail?" I asked quietly. "I sent another entry yesterday." She nodded. "Yes, I got it. It's impressive how persistent he's been in trying to convince you to sell the house. Any news on him? You haven't heard anything about his, financial situation?" Claire paused, as if deciding whether to speak. "Actually, yes," she said finally. "Mom was on the phone yesterday with Aunt Judith. You remember the friend of Mom's who works at the bank? She said that Uncle Tobias tried to get a big loan against the house he's supposedly going to inherit soon. He was turned down because he couldn't provide any documentation to prove his inheritance rights. I felt my heart quicken its rhythm. This was it. Confirmation that Tobias was really counting on my death and inheritance. "What else did you hear?" "Mom said he was in serious debt trouble. Some people were coming to their house demanding money. Mom thinks he was dealing with illegal creditors." The picture was getting clearer and clearer. Tobias was desperate, cornered by debt, and he saw my house as the only way out. "Thank you for telling me." I squeezed my granddaughter's hand. "It's important information." Claire looked worried. "Grandpa, I'm scared. If Uncle Tobias is really that desperate—" "Don't worry," I tried to reassure her. "I'll be careful, and I have proof of his actions." After Claire left, I shared the new information with Lester. He shook his head. "Debts and creditors. That explains his desperation. People who give illegal loans are not known for patience or mercy. Dr. Cumming came in the evening. He examined me, checked my vitals, and said I was doing well. If this continues, you can be discharged on Thursday, he said with a smile. Doctor, I need to talk to you, I said when he was finished. In private. Dr. Cumming glanced at Lester, who nodded tactfully. I can step outside for a few minutes, he suggested. No, stay, I said. You already know everything I want to tell you. Dr. Cumming sat down in a chair by the bed, looking at me expectantly. I'm listening, Mr. Mercer. I took a deep breath and began to talk about the conversation I'd overheard with Tobias, about the strange medication, about my son's persistent attempts to convince me to sell the house or rewrite my will. The doctor listened attentively without interrupting. Do you have any proof? He asked when I was finished. I have records of conversations with Tobias, I nodded, and I understand you have records of Winifred giving me non-prescription drugs. Dr. Cumming rubbed his chin. Yes, we found serious irregularities in Winifred's nursing work. She's been suspended pending an internal investigation. Do you think my son may have influenced her? Dr. Cumming chose his words carefully. I can't make accusations without proof, but the coincidence is really suspicious, especially given your story. What should I do? I asked you bluntly. If you think your life is in danger, you should go to the police, Dr. Cumming replied. For my part, I can provide medical records confirming irregularities in the dispensing of medication. I nodded, grateful for his support. There is one more thing, I said. My son is in desperate financial straits. He has large debts, including to illegal creditors. He expects to get my house after I die. Dr. Cumming frowned. That's a serious motive. I recommend you contact the police as soon as you are discharged. In the meantime, we will provide you with maximum security here. After the doctor left, I was relieved. I now had another ally, and my suspicions were confirmed by the medical staff. The night passed peacefully, but the next morning everything changed. I awoke to a strange sensation. Someone was in the room. When I opened my eyes, I saw Tobias standing by my bunk with a syringe in his hand. He was leaning over the IV attached to my arm. What are you doing? I asked sharply, fully awake from the shock. Tobias flinched and recoiled, trying to hide the syringe behind his back. Nothing, he answered quickly. I was just checking to see if everything was all right. You were sleeping so soundly, with a syringe in your hand? I pulled myself up on the bed, keeping my eyes on him. Tobias looked cornered. His face was flushed, his eyes darting around, looking for a way out. It's not what you think it is, he began to justify himself. What am I supposed to think? I asked, fumbling for my phone under my pillow and discreetly turning on the recording. You're standing over my bed at 6 in the morning with a syringe, about to inject something into my IV. What am I supposed to think, Tobias? Lester woke up from our conversation and sat up on his bed, quickly assessing the situation. I'll get the nurse, he said, reaching for the call button. Don't you dare, Tobias shouted, taking a step toward him. At that moment, the door opened and Perrin entered the room with a tray of morning treatments. Seeing Tobias with a syringe, he instantly assessed the situation. What's going on here? He asked sternly, placing the tray on the bedside table. My son tried to inject something into my IV, I said, pointing to the syringe in Tobias's hand. Tobias went pale, then red, his eyes darting between me, Lester, and Perrin. He looked like a hunted animal ready to make a desperate leap. It's not like that, he tried to defend himself. I just... Put the syringe on the table, Perrin ordered in a firm voice, slowly approaching Tobias. Slowly and carefully. Tobias clenched his fist, and for a second I thought he was going to lunge at Perrin. But then his shoulders slumped, as if all the air had been taken out of him. He put the syringe down on the bedside table. I just wanted to help, he muttered. Dad's in pain. He needs painkillers. What kind of anesthetic? Perrin asked, taking the syringe gently with 2 fingers. Are you a doctor? Do you know what can be administered to a patient with heart failure? Tobias remained silent, staring at the floor. "I'm calling security," Perrin said, heading for the door. "No!" Tobias shouted, blocking his path. "Please don't. This is all a misunderstanding." "Get out of my way," Perrin said calmly but firmly, "or I will be forced to use force." Tobias didn't move. His eyes became desperate. "You don't understand," he said, lowering his voice to a whisper. "I need the money. I need it now. They'll kill me if I don't pay." "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "The people I borrowed from." Tobias turned to me, his face contorted with fear. "I owed them 200,000. They gave me a week. If I don't pay them back, they—" He didn't finish the sentence. "And you decided to kill me to get the house?" I asked, feeling my heart clench with pain. Not physical pain, but the realization of how low my own son had fallen. Tobias shook his head, his eyes filling with tears. "I didn't mean to kill. Just hasten the inevitable. You're already old, sick. Why should you suffer for a few more years? And I need the money now, or I'm dead." I stared at him, not believing my ears. My son, the one I'd raised, the one I'd given everything I could, was justifying trying to kill his own father by saying I didn't have long to live anyway. "How could you, Tobias?" I asked quietly. "I'm your father." "Where were you when I needed a father?" he blurted out, his face contorted with anger. "Always in his workshop, always with the machines, never with me. Mother was the only one who took care of me, and when she died, you didn't even try to be there for me." His words hit me harder than any physical pain. Was I really such a bad father? Was this really how Tobias had felt all these years? "I loved you, Tobias," I said, feeling a lump come up in my throat. "I've always loved you." "Loved you?" He grinned bitterly. "You don't even know who I am, what I do for a living, what's important to me." "I know that money is more important to you than your own father's life," I replied, feeling the anger rising inside, pushing the pain out. Perrin took the moment to slip past Tobias and out into the hallway. He returned a moment later with 2 guards. "This man tried to inject an unknown substance into the patient's IV," Perrin said, pointing at Tobias. "The syringe is on the table. Don't touch it. There might be prints on it." The guards nodded and approached Tobias. "You'll have to come with us, sir," one of them said. Tobias didn't resist. He looked broken, his whole body limp, as if his strength had been drained from him. "Father," he said, turning to me for the last time, "please don't report me. They'll kill me if I go to jail. I won't be able to pay them from behind bars." I looked at my son, a scared, desperate man willing to kill for money. What was I supposed to feel? Hate? Contempt? But all I felt was endless fatigue and bitterness. "I don't know, Tobias," I said honestly. "I'll have to think about it." The guards led him out of the room and Perrin took the syringe carefully, wrapping it in a sterile tissue. "I'll give this to Dr. Cumming," he said. "He'll decide if the police should be called." When everyone had gone, Lester came and sat down next to me. "Are you all right?" he asked with genuine concern. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "My own son." I couldn't finish the sentence. "He's desperate," Lester said quietly. "People do terrible things when they're cornered. That's no excuse, of course, but—" I nodded, realizing what he meant. Tobias wasn't just greedy or angry, he was scared to death. These illegal moneylenders Claire was talking about must have been serious people if they'd made him take such a desperate step. An hour later, Dr. Cumming came in. He was grim and serious. "We've sent the contents of the syringe for analysis," he said, "but the preliminary assessment was that it was a lethal dose of morphine. Your son is being held by security, and the police are on their way." I sighed, feeling my heart clench with pain. "What's he facing?" "Attempted murder is a serious charge," Dr. Cumming replied, "especially since we have evidence of previous attempts through drug manipulation." I closed my eyes. trying to comprehend everything that was happening. My son, my own son, had tried to kill me, and now he was facing prison. "Doctor," I said, opening my eyes, "can you give me some time before calling the police? I want to talk to my son." Dr. Cumming looked surprised. "Are you sure? After what he tried to do?" "Yes," I nodded. "He is my son after all, and I want to know why he's gotten to this point." The doctor hesitated but then nodded. "Good. I'll have the guards bring him here, but they'll be outside the door and at the first sign of danger." "I understand," I interrupted him. "Thank you." 20 minutes later, the guards brought Tobias in. He looked 10 years older, his face gaunt, his eyes red, his hands trembling. "Sit down," I said, pointing to a chair by the bed. Tobias sat down obediently, not looking up. "Tell me everything," I demanded. "About the debts, about the creditors, about how you got to this point." And Tobias did. About his bad investments, about the real estate market crash, about how he'd borrowed money to cover his previous debts, how he got into the gambling business hoping for a quick win and lost everything he had, how he turned to illegal moneylenders when banks refused to lend to him, and how these people threatened him and his family if he didn't repay the debt on time. "I saw no other way out," he finished his story. "Your house is the only thing of value I have, or rather, what I could have after your death. And you decided to hasten my death," I said, not asking, but affirming. Tobias nodded silently, not looking up. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked. "Didn't you tell me about your problems? Maybe we could have found another solution." Tobias grinned bitterly. "And what would you have done? Sell your precious house to help your loser son? You always said the house was all you had left of your mom, that you'd never sell it." "But that's no reason to kill me," I exclaimed, feeling the anger rising again. "I know," Tobias whispered, his shoulders slumping even more. I don't know what came over me. I was desperate. These people, they don't joke when they threaten. They've come to our house before, scaring Jessica and the kids." I sighed, feeling the anger give way to fatigue. My son, as desperate as he was, had tried to kill me, twice. And now he was facing prison and his family, possibly the vengeance of creditors. "How much do you owe?" I asked after a long silence. 200,000, Tobias answered without looking up, plus interest, which goes up every day. I nodded, accepting the decision. "I'll pay your debt," I said, feeling Lester look at me in surprise, "but on a condition." Tobias looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "What condition?" "You get treatment for your gambling addiction. You'll never gamble again." "Never again, Tobias. That's my only condition." Tobias looked shocked. Will you pay my debt? After what I tried to do?" "You're my son," I answered simply. "No matter what. But if you break the condition, if you start gambling again or get into debt, I won't help. And yes, I will file a police report for attempted murder." Tobias looked at me with wide eyes that were a mixture of disbelief, gratitude, and shame. "Why?" he whispered. "Why are you helping me after all I've done?" I stared at him for a long time, remembering the little boy with the wide smile who used to run around the yard of our house playing with the dog. The boy who used to bring me his drawings and ask me if I liked them. The boy who cried when I left on business trips and ran happily to meet me when I returned. "Because I'm your father," I finally answered, "and I will always love you, even if I haven't always been able to show it." A week after the Tobias incident, I finally made it home. Mabel's car stopped in the driveway and I just sat there for a few minutes, looking at my house, the red brick, the wide porch, the tall windows, the house I'd built with my own hands for Odelia, the house my own son was ready to kill me for. "Are you all right, Father?" Mabel asked, turning off the engine. "Yes," I nodded, opening the door. "It's just weird coming back after everything that had happened. Claire, who was sitting in the back seat, got out and helped me with my bag. She was smiling, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "I'll heat up dinner," she said as we entered the house. "Mom made your favorite soup." I nodded gratefully and made my way into the living room. Everything looked exactly the same as it had before I'd been hospitalized, but it felt different. It was as if my home, my fortress, had been desecrated by betrayal. Mabel made me comfortable in a chair, brought me a blanket and a cup of tea. "How are you feeling?" she asked, sitting down across from me. "Physically much better," I answered honestly. "Dr. Cummings said the recovery was going well." Mabel nodded, then paused as if searching for words. Morally?" I sighed. Mabel knew about Tobias's attempt, even though I'd asked Dr. Cumming not to tell the police until I'd decided how to proceed. "It's hard," I admitted. "It's not every day you find out your own son wants to kill you." Mabel pressed her lips together, her eyes hardening. "I never thought Tobias would do something like that," she said quietly. "I knew he had money problems, but—" She shook her head, unable to find the words. "He was desperate," I said, surprised at myself for defending my son. "Those creditors, they threatened his family." "That's no excuse," Mabel replied sharply. "Nothing justifies trying to kill your own father. He should be put on trial." I looked at my daughter, seeing the anger and determination in her eyes. Mabel had always been principled, even tough. Maybe too tough. "I haven't decided what to do yet," I said. "Tobias is under house arrest right now. I have time to think about it." Mabel wanted to object, but Claire came into the room with a tray. "Lunch is ready," she announced with a strained smile. We went into the kitchen and Claire poured the soup onto plates. We ate in silence, each absorbed in his own thoughts. "I'm going to stay here tonight," Mabel said when we were done. "I'll bring Claire's things tomorrow. She's moving in with you like we agreed." I nodded, grateful for my daughter and granddaughter's concern. "Thank you, Mabel." "You too, Claire. I don't know what I'd do without you." That evening, after Mabel had gone to the guest room and Claire was helping me take my medicine, I decided to have the conversation I had been putting off. "Claire," I began as she handed me a glass of water, "are you sure you want to live here with me? After everything that's happened with Tobias, I wouldn't want you to feel like you were in danger." Claire shook her head decisively. "I'm not afraid, grandfather. Uncle Tobias is under house arrest and the police are watching him. Besides," she smiled, "you didn't handle him alone in the hospital, and I'm much younger and stronger than you." I grinned, touched by her bravery. "You are definitely Odelia's granddaughter," I said fondly. "Just as brave and determined." Claire sat on the edge of my bed. "Grandpa, what are you going to do about Uncle Tobias? Mom says he should be sent to prison, but you don't think so?" I finished for her. Claire shrugged her shoulders. "I don't. What he did is terrible, but he's still your son and my uncle." I sighed, understanding her conflicted feelings. "I don't know either, Claire. On the one hand, what Tobias did was unforgivable. On the other hand, he was in a desperate situation, and prison isn't going to make him any better." "Are you really going to pay his debt?" Claire asked. "Mom says it's crazy." "I'm thinking about it," I answered honestly. "Not for Tobias's sake, but for Jessica and the kids. They shouldn't have to suffer because of his mistakes." Claire nodded, understanding my logic. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you," she said, squeezing my hand. I lay awake long into the night, thinking about Tobias, about his attempted murder, about his debts and despair. I remembered him as a child, a naughty but generally happy boy. When did he change? When did money become more important to him than family? Maybe Mabel was right, and he should answer for his actions to the law. But what good would that do? Tobias would get jail time. His wife and children would be left unsupported, possibly threatened by creditors. And our family would finally fall apart. I made my decision this morning. After breakfast, as Mabel was about to leave, I asked her to stay late. I want to meet Tobias, I said. Here, at my house. And I want you and Claire to be there. Mabel frowned. Why? He tried to kill you, Father. Twice. I know, I nodded. But before I decide whether to file a police report, I want to talk to him. The whole family. Mabel hesitated but then nodded. Okay, I'll call the officer who's watching him, but I don't think talking will make any difference. 2 hours later, a police car brought Tobias in. He entered the house, accompanied by an officer, gaunt, with circles under his eyes, in wrinkled clothes. Tobias looked 10 years older. Wait outside, I said to the officer. I'll call if I need you. When the officer left, it was just the four of us, me, Mabel, Claire, and Tobias. We sat in the living room, and a heavy silence hung in the air. Why did you call me? Tobias finally asked, without looking up. I want to talk about what happened, I answered. And what's going to happen next? Tobias looked up, and I saw a mixture of fear and despair in his eyes. Are you going to apply? He asked bluntly. That's up to you, I answered. I have proof of your 2 attempted murders, taped conversations, medical records, witness statements, enough to get you serious jail time. Tobias turned even paler. His hands began to tremble. But there is another way, I continued. I'm willing to pay your debt and not file a police report, with conditions. What conditions? Tobias asked, hope in his voice. First, you'll undergo a full course of treatment for your gambling addiction. Second, you'll find a normal job, not as a realtor but something stable, with a fixed salary. Third, you'll visit me, Mabel, and Claire regularly to rebuild family ties. And if I refuse? Tobias asked, though his face showed that he already knew the answer. Then I'll turn the evidence over to the police, and you'll go to jail, I said calmly. The choice is yours. Mabel looked at me with surprise and disbelief. Father, are you serious? After everything he's done, you're giving him a second chance? I turned to my daughter. Yes, Mabel, because he's my son, and your brother, and Claire's uncle. What will his prison time get us? Only more pain and destruction. Mabel shook her head but didn't argue. What's your decision, Tobias? I asked, turning to my son. Tobias was silent for a long time, staring at the floor. Then he looked up, and I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years' sincerity. I agree, he said quietly. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry I got to this point, and I want to change. I nodded, accepting his decision. Okay. Tomorrow you and I and the officer will go to your creditors and settle the debt, and then I'll sign you up for the clinic. After that conversation, something changed in the atmosphere of the house. It was as if the heavy cloud hanging over us began to dissipate. Mabel was still tense and distrustful, but not so adamant. Claire looked relieved, though wary, and I felt strangely calm, as if I'd made the right decision. The next day, Tobias, the officer, and I did go to see his creditors, 2 grim men in expensive suits who received us in an office with curtained windows. I paid $220,000, the entire amount owed with interest, and got a receipt for full repayment. Tobias didn't look me in the eye as we left, but I could see his shoulders straighten as if a heavy weight had been lifted from them. A week after I got home, I called my lawyer and asked him to come over. Morrow Jenkins, a gray-haired man about my age whom we had been friends since high school, arrived the same day. I want to change the will, I said as we settled into my office. Because of what happened to Tobias? Morrow asked bluntly. He knew what had happened. News travels fast in a small town. Yes, I nodded, but not just because of that. I want my house to go to Claire when I die. She's the only one who really cares about me, and the only one who values this house not for its market value, but for the memories that come with it. Morrow wrote down my wishes. And Mabel and Tobias? Mabel will get my savings about $100,000. Tobias, I wondered. Tobias will get my workshop with tools and the old Ford Mustang I've been restoring. The car is worth about $30,000 if he wants to sell it. Are you sure? Morrow asked, looking at me carefully. After what he tried to do, I'm sure, I nodded. I don't want him to be left with no inheritance at all. It would only make him more bitter and resentful. But I can't trust him with the house either. Morrow nodded, accepting my arguments. There is one more condition, I added. Tobias gets his share of the inheritance only if he completes a full course of treatment for his gambling addiction and doesn't relapse within a year of my death. Otherwise, his share goes to Claire. Morrow raised his eyebrows. An unusual condition, but I can include it. Who will verify compliance? Mabel, I answered. She won't let Tobias cheat the system. When Morrow left, promising to have the documents ready by the end of the week, I went out onto the veranda and sat in the old rocking chair. The day was clear, sunny, and I looked out at my manicured yard, at the flower beds that Odelia had once planted and that my neighbor Martha now maintained. Claire came out to me with a cup of tea. "Is everything all right, Grandpa?" she asked, sitting down beside me. "Yeah," I nodded, just thinking about life, about family, how things have changed over the years. Claire was silent, giving me a chance to speak. "You know," I continued, "when I built this house, I dreamed that it would be a place where our family would gather for the holidays, where my grandchildren would grow up, where there would always be laughter. But life has taken a different course." "It's not too late," Claire said quietly. "A family can be a family again." I looked at my granddaughter, a smart, kind girl, so much like Odelia. "You're right," I agreed. "Maybe what happened will be the beginning of something new. Maybe Tobias will really change. Maybe Mabel will be a little softer. Or maybe," Claire smiled, "we'll just get together more often, like for dinner this Sunday?" I laughed, feeling the heaviness of the last few weeks begin to recede. "That's a great idea. We'll invite Mabel and Tobias and their family. And Lester and his wife, I promised him I'd show him my collection of old car parts." Claire nodded, clearly pleased with my enthusiasm. "I'll make apple pie from my grandmother's recipe." We sat on the veranda, watching the sun slip toward dusk, and I thought about the strange turn my life had taken. My own son had tried to kill me, and now he was getting a second chance. My daughter, who had kept aloof for years, started calling and stopping by more often, and my granddaughter had moved in with me, filling the house with the life it had sorely lacked since Odelia's death. That night, lying in bed, I thought of Tobias, of his despair and his attempted murder. I hadn't forgiven him. The wound was too fresh. But I gave him a chance to redeem himself, a chance to be a better man. I'm not sure he deserved it, but I knew Odelia would approve of my decision. She always believed in second chances, in the possibility of redemption. I fell asleep thinking that maybe something good would come out of this dark story after all. Maybe our broken family would finally begin to heal. And maybe this house I had built with my own hands would once again become a home in the full sense of the word, a place where a loving family gathers. The next day I met Tobias at the clinic where he had been admitted for treatment. He looked lost and scared, but I could see the determination in his eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly as we said goodbye. "For the second chance. I know I don't deserve one." "Prove that I wasn't wrong to give it to you," I said, shaking his hand. That evening I sat in my office going through old photographs. Odelia and the kids on a picnic by the lake. Tobias on his first bicycle. Mabel in her prom dress. Claire, just born, in the arms of her happy grandmother. I selected a few snapshots and framed them on the mantelpiece in the living room. Family photos, a reminder that no matter what, we are still a family, broken, scarred, but family. On Sunday night, everyone gathered at my house for the first time in years. Mabel, Tobias and his wife and children, Claire, Lester and his wife Marion, even the nurse Perrin, whom we had befriended during my hospital stay. The atmosphere was tense, especially between Mabel and Tobias, but gradually the ice began to melt. After dinner, when everyone had dispersed to different rooms, the children were playing in the living room, the women were discussing recipes in the kitchen, and the men were gathered in my office. I felt a strange peacefulness. Maybe it was because my house was full of life again. Maybe because of the realization that I'd made the right decision in giving Tobias a chance at redemption. Or maybe it was simply because I'd survived and had the opportunity to see my family begin to relearn how to be a family. I stood at my study window, looking out at my garden, lit by the setting sun, and thought about Odelia. What would she say if she saw us now? Would she approve of my decision? I think so. She's always believed in the power of forgiveness and second chances. "I did what you wanted me to do, Odelia," I whispered, looking at the setting sun. "I kept our family together, as much as I could." And I thought the slight breeze that ruffled the curtains was her answer.